Councilman Hughes, and for one last time.
Do we have any agenda? Thank you. And I understand we do at least one announcement or comment. And with that, I would like to ask Karen Schaub to step forward, who has an introduction for us this evening. Karen, how are you today?
I'm fabulous. Good evening. It is such a pleasure to be here tonight and to be with you, Community Education Director. My heart is full of gratitude for the experience that I've had in the school district and the opportunity to work with individuals and a great school board. And now it's been really great to introduce you to Cindy, which many of you might know, but let me just tell you a little bit about her. She got her undergraduate degree from Wisconsin La Crosse. She got her master's degree from St. Thomas in Education Administration. And she's been in our district for about 16 years. She lives in the district. She has a child in the district. And she's been a wonderful, collaborative, and strong, community education member in our department. I've had the pleasure to work with her for my entire time here. I had the pleasure of watching her go through her master's degree program, and certainly she is more than ready to take on this opportunity. So I'd like to introduce our new community ed director, Cindy Arneson, and wish her the best of luck in working in a wonderful community.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, school board. She stole some of my thunder in regards to letting you know that I am a community member. I do have a child that goes to our school district. I am actually a 2000 graduate of Roseville Area Schools as well. So Roseville's strong, right? I'm excited to lead as we look to enhance and create new opportunities and connections in our community at large. I look to listen to the community. I look forward to listening to the community, facilitating conversations in the community, and responding to the needs of the community. I thank you for this honor, and I look forward to the future. I kind of want to jump with joy, like I'm so excited, right? That's what I want. But I'd also like to take this moment to honor Karen Schaub for her incredible leadership over the years. I've learned so much from you, and I greatly appreciate your support and mentorship over those years. So thank you, Karen, and you will be greatly missed.
We look forward to having you and being as successful as Karen has been.
Thank you.
In discussion before the meeting today, the students would think that it might be appropriate to make a comment or two just about processes. And I think for those of you who tuned in at 6:45 and wondered why the later start, it's because this evening was our annual Truth in Taxation presentation, which is mandated in the actual Minnesota statutes to start no later than 6 p.m. And I imagine, I wasn't around, I wasn't born when that was written, but I imagine it was put in there to ensure that people could get home from work and nobody could run anything by them, that they'd have a chance to come and attend the meeting, or as some districts do, as we do, we broadcast it so they could actually hear us starting at 6 o'clock. And so recognizing there's a lot of material that we start the regular meeting a little later, but also brought to mind that, we have had a bunch of questions over the last couple months in particular as folks have been concerned about things like the pandemic and our mitigation responses to our processes and how we do what we do and why we do it. There's a lot of questions about the public comment section. And so I think that some of us thought that we just we would clarify some of that everything we do is really mindful of two things. One, the open meeting law and the requirements around the open meeting law, and the fact that everything we do is transparent and is open to the public. And that coupled with the principle of board unanimity. And even in the statutes, there's no such thing as a split board really once a vote is done. If a vote is 6-0, 5-1, 4-2, the board is acted as a board, as a whole. And if you put those together, it really constrains to some extent. We don't debate or exchange things openly during the meeting. It's a business meeting of the board. Some people have said it's kind of like a jury, right? The jury hears the facts, they hear the opinions, they hear what people are saying, then they kind of think about stuff and deliberate among themselves and vote their decision. It is kind of like that. We can't talk about anything that's not on the agenda. And the agenda is published at least 3 or 4 days in advance because the purpose of that is to make sure that anyone who says, oh, look what they're gonna be talking about that night, I wanna be there. Or I wanna send an email that morning, or I wanna give somebody a call on the board and share my opinion or give my 2 cents worth, or I wanna come and speak. They can come and speak to that issue. That evening, when we get to the agenda and we're talking about that topic, we'll have heard them, or we'll have received that email. So if someone comes to us with something we're gonna be talking about later, we can process it that way. If someone comes to us and brings up a question or issue that we haven't, that isn't on the agenda, we certainly can't respond. And so we do listen, and we do take it in, and we do then respond within a couple of weeks directly to that speaker. But it's a position that does, to some, seem kind of absurd. We could have a speaker tonight who could show up and say, you know, as we all know, 2 + 2 = 5. And I've discovered that you're teaching that 2 + 2 = 4, and you're intentionally doing that so those kids can't get jobs. Well, we may all believe that that's incorrect, that 2 + 2 does not = 5. That we're teaching 2 + 2 = 4 because that's the right thing to do. And we may feel that there's no intent to keep that kid from getting a job. But we listen politely, we say thank you, we respond. And even in that response, if we as a board have never ever considered as a board the question of whether we think 2 + 2 actually equals 4 or 5, we even in the response that I or whoever the chair might be responds, we can't really address that because we've not discussed it as a board. And so at that point, one of us could say, hey, Mike, that is an important question. Let's put that on an agenda. So then a month later or so, it might appear. The public will get a chance to see that, oh, that evening we're going to be discussing whether or not 2 + 2 = 4 or 5. They can come, they can share thoughts with us. We can absorb that and have that debate with ourselves as a board. But that's why we do just sit here. But it doesn't mean if someone says 2 + 2 = 5, we all know that. It doesn't mean that we agree with it. It also doesn't mean we disagree with it. We as a board have no feeling on it. We have no response to it because we haven't met and discussed it and concluded about it as a board. So it does seem kind of odd, I think, that people could say anything. And we accept it, and we say thank you, and we get back to them individually and move on. So just thought that could be helpful for folks to understand who have just started paying attention to what we do this year because of the important issues that have come before us, as to why we kind of behave that way during the public comment section and what the practice and processes are. So that's it. And with that, we'll move into this evening's community input. And Jeff, I don't have it up. Could you just
Yes.
list the first speaker for me,
We
please?
have to do that. Bruce Ona is our first speaker.
And also, sir, we are asking speakers to make sure that when they're at the podium to keep your mask on. I know there's an impediment, but it is policy. And in the past, we haven't really noticed when that hasn't happened, but we have had some folks who pointed out to us that we are inconsistent with that. So any speakers tonight, please leave your masks in proper position while you speak. Thank you. With that, Mr. O'Neill.
Hi, neighbors. At the November 23rd school board meeting, the Director of Equity and Innovation stated at 3, quote, the impact of teachers of color on students of color is immeasurable. He went on to say, quote, the impact that staff of color and administrative of color, unquote. I think he meant administrators. He continued, quote, students who see people that look like them in these roles is immeasurable, so that this is a part of this particular goal, unquote. So he's saying it's important for students to have staff that. So the belief system under the equity program has as its goal to have every skin, color, and culture equally represented and concluded in the classroom and staff, that kids excel in learning this way. Let me share with you a deeply embedded culture in Roseville students. This culture contains the following. Marriage is between a man and a woman. Girls' sports teams are for girls, not for those who mistakenly believe they are of a different identity. Sex before marriage spreads dangerous STDs. An unborn baby is a living human being and has great value. Homosexuality is a misuse of the human body that has dangerous health consequences. Girls have the right to privacy in their bathrooms from other sexes. Science and biology and DNA science and hard-fought women's privacy rights also affirm this healthier culture. Under equity guidelines, this culture shall expect to be granted at least equal representation by staff and teachers and administrators and insider support groups staffed by teachers like the LGBT, the non-science group has. At the Bloomington Civic Center LGBTQ Pride event, they had 3 drag queens reading to the kids, and all 3 were porn stars. One of them worships at a satanic temple, and so this is 100% of these are bad influence on our kids. This brings highly into question the character of LGBT.
Thank you, Mr. Ona. Who's next?
Alan Olson.
Mr. Rosset. Welcome.
Hello. All right, hello. Well, I want to thank you very much for getting back to me with my comments from the previous meeting on November 23rd. Now, the issue that I wanted to focus in on specifically was actually 2. The first one was the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. Now, I don't know if I made the question clear, but I was wondering if this is a book that is being used in the training materials for our staff members. Now, in the email, this board stated to me, quote, "That book has generated reviews both praiseful and condemnatory and everywhere in between. Perhaps that in and of itself is a reason to read it and consider it to spur thoughtful debate the concepts proposed." Now, I would just like to repeat for everybody here a quote from the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. Quote, "The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy for present discrimination is future discrimination." Now, the thing is that this is a book that is openly and unabashedly called for discrimination on the basis of race, and Ibram X. Kendi has not made any qualms about it. I would also like to point out that Ibram X. Kendi, the author of this book, has also, among many other things, he has called those who resist COVID lockdowns slaveholders. He has also promoted the idea that the executive branch in our federal government should create a new department that has the unilateral power to strike down any law at the local, state, or federal level that this organization would deem as racist. And this is in addition to many other things that Kendi has stated. So this board also stated, quote, in the email, quote, "Certainly our teachers and staff collectively possess the intelligence and judgment to use any book or written work as a catalyst for thought and reflection." I would have to say that any teacher or educator that intends to use materials or books from Ibram X. Kendi, I would have to seriously call into their judgment because, again, this is a book that openly calls for discrimination. So my question to this board is 2 questions. First, is this book, Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist, is this included in any of the training materials for our staff members? And my second question is any material from Ibram X. Kendi going to be used in the training of our staff members? So I would like to have an answer on that. And then my second point, and also just one last point, is that basically Ibram X. Kendi's materials don't encourage debate. They just basically encourage everyone to label those who disagree with them as racist in hopes of shutting them up. So it doesn't really encourage debate. And real quickly, with the terms of the term Latinx, the email, this board said in the email, quote, "I'm not sure there is a definite right or wrong that is universally agreed upon even within the Latinx/Latina/Latino communities. Recently, I would like to point out to this board that Politico recently did a poll of Hispanics, and they found that only 2% of Hispanics used the term Latinx, and 40% of those surveyed were offended by the term. So I would just like to reiterate that colonizing the Spanish language is not a very good idea. The proper term is Latino, not Latinx, and the Hispanic population just doesn't really like that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Watson.
Our last speaker signed up is Angela Byrne.
Welcome.
Thank you, board, once again, for the opportunity to speak tonight. I just want to speak as a parent of a trans child. I want to talk about the need for privacy in women and femmes bathrooms. Is that I think an important question to ask us is why we need that privacy, why women had to fight for that. And I'd just like to point out, because cis men are taught by the patriarchy to have entitlement to women, femmes, queer, and trans bodies. And if we actually work on dismantling the patriarchy, we wouldn't even need to have gender-separated bathrooms. We could have age-appropriate ones. and allow our children to move freely where they feel the most comfortable instead of having to have this disproportionate and unnecessary fear for them. With the remainder of my time, I'd like to read a definition of moral panic, definitely apropos of many of the community's comments at these meetings of late. It is a mass movement based on the false or exaggerated perception that some cultural behavior or group of people is dangerously deviant and poses a threat to society's values and interests. Moral panics are generally fueled by media coverage of social issues. The phenomenon was first described in 1972 in relation to the mods and rockers groups of the 1960s. Since then, moral panics have occurred in relation to the satanic panic of the 1980s, violence in video games in the 1990s, stranger danger from super predators and razor blades and Halloween candy, Islamophobia after 9/11, Dungeons and Dragons in the 1980s, and that even continued into Harry Potter in the 2000s, that it was somehow teaching witchcraft and I don't even know what to children. Currently, the anti-critical race theory movement is that CRT is a very specific class taught in law school. It is not taught in our schools, and it is used against equity and diversity education in our schools. And then finally, I'd like to point out that the LGBTQ community continues to be a convenient folk devil, from the AIDS epidemic to pedophilia to now some conspiracy that trans people are trying to assault people in bathrooms. Again, I'd like to encourage the board to continue moving forward with MD's guidance and any district policies to support LGBTQ youth, as they are historically and by any measure of any data more likely and more susceptible to abuse and other disparate outcomes for their mental health and other things. So let's continue to make sure that our children are healthy and are experiencing a diversity of cultures and races and experiences, to make sure that they don't grow up to have disproportionate fears of their peers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Thank you, Josh. With that, we will slowly turn the consent agenda, because I just realized I was remiss in not asking for a volunteer before the meeting to use the gift this evening. So if anyone is willing to do that, would that want to call that up on your screen or have it as a printout when we get to that point, I will ask for a volunteer to read it. Katie, excellent. Thank you. Director Dodgers will do gifts this evening. With that, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? We have no retirements this evening, so with that, Dr. Dodd, please share the gifts.
Roseville Area Schools received several gifts. One from James from one for the weight room, from KFI Engineers, funds for the robotic team, from Gail Starrett, funds for the boys cross country program, from Lori and Jonathan Hickman, funds for the weight room. From the Roseville Girls Basketball Booster Club, funds for coaching staff. The Roz Dance Club Booster Club, funds for additional coaches. From the Roz Gymnastic Booster Association, funds for super fan t-shirts. From the Roseville Area Schools has received from CAP America on behalf of Holly Anderson, funds for principal discretion. From Vital Cap, multiple pairs of scissors for student and staff use.